My sister had me arrested while wearing my wedding gown. The accusations she made ended up ruining her instead. Can you imagine having your dream wedding shattered, not by cold feet, but by your own sister, who then had you arrested in your wedding dress for a crime she committed? Because that's exactly what happened to me, and trust me, the story only gets crazier from there. My sister, Diane, had fixated on the Rosewood Vineyard since she was barely a teenager. I'm talking actual drawings of herself getting married there, Pinterest boards with thousands of photos, even monthly pilgrimages just to walk the grounds, pretending it was her big day. The only problem? She wasn't engaged, not even dating anyone. But in her mind, that vineyard was hers, her future wedding, her fantasy. Anyone else even thinking about it was stealing her dream. So, when my fiancé Oliver suggested Rosewood, I didn't know about Diane's decades-long obsession. I just saw a beautiful place for our wedding. We put down the deposit, sent out the save the dates. Everything was perfect, until Diane found out. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just got eerily quiet. And that should have been my first warning. "That's not fair, Olivia," she said, her voice disturbingly calm. "You know I've always wanted to get married there." I was bewildered. I didn't know Diane. "You never told me." But she just shook her head, a cold glint in her eyes. "I shouldn't have to tell you. Sisters just know these things. You're doing this to hurt me." I remember feeling a chill run down my spine, then a kind of sick dread. 2 weeks later, the neighborhood started buzzing. Expensive jewelry vanished from homes. Mrs. Walsh's diamond tennis bracelet, the Hendersons' anniversary rings, Mr. Kim's Rolex. Small enough thefts that people noticed days later, after the items had been subtly moved. The police started investigating, going door to door, asking questions. And guess who was suddenly the most helpful person on the block? Diane. She volunteered to coordinate neighborhood watch meetings, acting so concerned for everyone's safety. She even made flyers about securing valuables and distributed them personally. Looking back, the audacity of it makes my blood boil. Then, 5 days before my wedding, as I was doing final dress fittings, the police showed up at the boutique. They had a warrant to search my car, based on an anonymous tip. I laughed, honestly. I thought it was some ridiculous mistake. But then they started finding things. Mrs. Walsh's bracelet in my glove compartment, the Hendersons' rings in my spare tire, Mr. Kim's watch, wrapped in tissue, tucked into my gym bag. I kept stammering, saying I didn't know how they got there, that someone must have planted them. Officer Ruiz, the detective, just stared at me skeptical. These items were hidden in 3 separate locations, all wrapped carefully, all from houses you've been to recently. And I had been to those houses. Diane had asked me to help deliver her neighborhood watch flyers. She'd stayed in the car, complaining her ankle hurt from yoga, while I knocked on doors. And each time I'd left my car unlocked. A wave of sickening realization washed over me. They arrested me right there, still in my wedding dress. The seamstress, pin still in hand, looked horrified. Oliver got the call at work. By the time he made bail, I'd spent 6 hours in a holding cell, my wedding week utterly destroyed. But something about the case bothered Officer Ruiz. The anonymous tip had been too specific. The caller knew exactly where each item would be, down to the pocket of my gym bag. He pulled the recording. The voice was disguised, but the caller said something chilling. "Check her car, especially the gym bag in the trunk, the blue one with the side pocket. She always keeps valuables there when she thinks no one's looking." How would a random tipster know about my specific gym bag? My habits? Ruiz got suspicious. He checked traffic cameras near the theft locations, and that's when he saw it. My car at each house, yes, but also Diane's car. Parked 1 street over, arriving before me, leaving after. He decided to pay Diane a routine visit, just gathering information. Diane, ever so eager to help, practically burst with feigned concern. She pulled out a notebook, meticulously documenting my suspicious behavior. "Look," she said, practically beaming. I wrote down every time I saw Olivia acting strange, coming home late, being secretive about wedding expenses. I think she needed money for her fancy vineyard wedding. Ruiz studied the notebook, his face unreadable. These entries are very detailed. You've been watching your sister closely. Diane puffed out her chest. Just being protective. Sisters look out for each other. She's getting married at Rosewood Vineyard, you know. Always had expensive taste. That struck Ruiz as odd. Why mention the venue? He pressed her. Diane started rambling, her voice rising, about how some people didn't deserve nice things, how they took what belonged to others, how the universe had ways of stopping selfish people. And then she made her fatal mistake. You should also check her old purse, the brown leather one. She probably hid evidence there, too. Ruiz hadn't mentioned finding anything in a purse, and I didn't even own a brown leather purse. When they searched Diane's apartment, they found a brown leather purse in her closet. Inside, receipts from pawn shops. She'd been selling the real stolen items, planting fakes or similar pieces in my car. The pawn shop even had Diane on camera, selling each item. The owner remembered her because she'd claimed she was raising money for her sister's wedding. A surprise gift. How generous, he'd thought. Confronted with the evidence, Diane broke. She confessed everything. Months of planning. Stealing from our neighbors just to frame me. Making sure I'd be arrested right before my wedding. The sheer malice of it still takes my breath away. Officer Ruiz sat across from me in the police station conference room and explained that all charges were being dropped. Immediately, Diane was arrested instead for theft, fraud, and filing a false police report. The relief hit me so hard my hands started shaking uncontrollably, even when I pressed them flat against the cold table. But underneath that relief, there was something else. Something hollow and sick. My sister had done this. On purpose. She'd looked at me and decided I deserved to be destroyed because I was getting married at a venue she wanted. Ruiz kept talking about evidence and confessions, but his voice sounded far away. All I could think about was Diane staying in my car while I delivered those flyers, knowing she was planting stolen jewelry. She'd watched me walk up to each house, innocent and clueless, while she ruined my life one hidden bracelet at a time. Oliver showed up 20 minutes later. I heard his voice in the hallway before I saw him. When he walked in, he didn't ask what happened or if the charges were dropped. He just walked over, pulled me out of the chair, and held me. And that's when I finally broke. Not the relieved kind of crying, but the deep, broken kind. He didn't try to make me stop. He just stood there, holding me while I sobbed into his shirt. Officer Ruiz quietly left, closing the door. We stood there for what felt like an eternity. When I finally stopped, my face swollen, my throat raw, Oliver handed me tissues. We couldn't hide forever. As we walked through the lobby, I saw them. Mrs. Walsh, the Hendersons, Mr. Kim. They knew I was innocent now. Ruiz must have told them. But I could feel their stares following me. Mrs. Walsh opened her mouth to say something, then closed it. I walked faster, Oliver's hand warm on my back, guiding me to the exit. The drive home was silent. Everything looked the same. The familiar streets, the houses, the trees. But everything was irrevocably different. I realized I was still wearing the clothes from the station. Not my wedding dress. They'd let me change. But in my mind, I'd worn that dress for 6 agonizing hours, felt the pins, the tight bodice. I could still feel it. Our apartment felt wrong. Too normal, like it hadn't gotten the memo that my world had been upended. My wedding binder was still on the coffee table, the seating chart spread across the dining room. Oliver suggested we call the venue, but I couldn't. I couldn't think about flower arrangements or first dances. All I could think about was my sister confessing she tried to send me to jail over a vineyard. My phone on the kitchen counter was a storm of notifications. 63 missed calls, over 100 texts, most from family reacting to Diane's arrest. But the messages that truly twisted my gut were from my mother. From "Are you okay?" to "There must be a mistake," to Diane would never do this. Then how could you let them arrest your own sister? They got angrier with each message, but not a single one asked if I was okay after being arrested. Not one apologized for my handcuffs. It was all about Diane. I put the phone face down and walked away. An hour later, the buzzer rang. My best friend, Maya, since middle school. Oliver buzzed her up without asking. 2 minutes later, she was there with Chinese takeout and 2 bottles of wine. She took one look at my face and said she was staying the night. She didn't ask questions. She just sat with me while I tried to process that my sister had just tried to destroy my life over a wedding venue. The next morning, Officer Ruiz called again. Diane had confessed everything during her breakdown. She'd admitted to planning it for months, stealing from neighbors, specifically to frame me. She kept detailed notes on my schedule, my vulnerabilities, how to make it convincing. She wanted to ruin my wedding so badly she didn't care if I went to jail. She actually said that, Ruiz added, his voice gentle. She believed you deserved it for stealing her dream. My parents showed up that morning, knocking loud and insistently. My mother, face red and puffy, started immediately about Diane being sensitive, struggling with anxiety, how this was a mental health crisis, not a criminal act. Pacing, she talked about therapy, medication, how he needed to support Diane. My father looked defeated, trying to apologize, but my mother talked over him every time. Neither of them acknowledged what Diane had actually done. No felony, no fraud, just problems. My mother finally stopped. "Are you going to press charges?" she demanded, as if I was the one making this choice. "The district attorney will handle that," I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. "You can tell them to drop it," she insisted. "I won't lie to protect Diane." Her face hardened. "You're being cold and unforgiving. Family is supposed to stick together." Then she left, pulling my father with her. The silence in the apartment was deafening. Maya squeezed my hand. 3 days later, I met with Lucian Stafford, a lawyer Maya recommended. He was younger than I expected, but sharp. He laid it out legally. I was cleared. But the arrest record existed. Public information. It could follow me. He recommended expunging it, which would take time, paperwork, and money, and a restraining order. Diane would get out eventually. Did I want her showing up at my apartment? At my workplace? He also mentioned a civil suit for damages, emotional distress, reputation harm, legal fees. "This isn't over just because the criminal charges were dropped," he said gently. "Clearing your name completely will take work." I signed the papers to retain him. Walking out, I felt a weariness that went bone deep. Oliver and I drove to Rosewood Vineyard the next afternoon. Kendall, the event coordinator, was sympathetic but firm. Our date was held for another week. Then they'd have to release it. They had a waiting list. We were supposed to get married in 4 days. Instead, I was sitting there, unable to even think about it. We left without making a decision. In the car, Oliver just asked, "What do you want to do?" I didn't have an answer. That evening, the doorbell rang. Mrs. Walsh, Mr. Kim, and both Hendersons stood in our living room, looking deeply uncomfortable. They'd come to apologize. They felt terrible for ever believing I could have stolen from them. They should have known better, should have questioned the evidence. Mrs. Walsh cried. Mr. Kim kept saying sorry. I told them it was okay, I understood. But I saw it in their faces, in the way they couldn't quite meet my eyes. Being falsely accused left a stain they couldn't forget. They'd seen me in handcuffs. That image wouldn't just vanish. 2 days later, Zachary Randolph, the district attorney, called. The case against Diane was airtight. Confession, pawn shop footage, planted evidence. He expected a plea deal, and he suggested I not come to the arraignment. Seeing Diane in court could be really hard, he said. I felt a wave of relief. The thought of sitting in a courtroom, watching my sister formally charged for destroying my life, was unbearable. That evening, Oliver looked nervous. "Can we talk?" he asked. My stomach plummeted. I braced myself for him to say we needed to call off the wedding completely. Instead, he suggested we postpone it for 3 months, do something smaller, just the people who actually showed up for us, and, he said, a different venue, somewhere without all this pain and drama attached. Not Rosewood. Somewhere new, where we could start fresh. I started crying again, but this time it was pure relief. He wasn't leaving me. He just wanted to heal, to celebrate properly. The next morning, I called the wedding planner. My hand shook. I expected anger about the deposit, the lost work. But she was incredibly kind. She'd been following the news. When I told her we wanted to postpone and find a different venue, she didn't hesitate. She knew of a small garden venue an hour outside the city. Intimate, flowering trees, string lights, a gazebo. Availability in 3 months. The idea of starting completely fresh, somewhere new, made me feel like I could finally breathe again. Like this wedding could actually be about Oliver and me, instead of everything Diane had destroyed. My mother called that afternoon. I heard her crying before she even said hello. She begged me to think about what this was doing to Diane's future. Prison? A criminal record? She kept saying Diane was sick, needed help, not punishment. That families were supposed to forgive. I told her Diane made her choices. I had spent 6 hours in holding, wearing my wedding dress, because of what she did. The charges against me were dropped, but the arrest was still on my record. Diane had been willing to destroy my entire life over a wedding venue. My mother's voice went cold. You're being unforgiving and cruel. You're choosing revenge over family. Then she hung up. I stared at my phone for a long time. Maya came over the next day to help me draft my victim impact statement for Diane's sentencing. Sitting at my kitchen table, describing those 6 hours in the holding cell, the humiliation, the fear of a criminal record, it hit me how close I'd come to losing everything. My career in finance would have been over. Diane knew that. She hadn't just wanted to ruin my wedding. She'd been willing to destroy my whole life because I booked a venue she wanted. Then Officer Ruiz called again with news that made everything worse. During their investigation, they discovered Diane had been stealing from family members for years. Small things. My grandmother's pearls, my aunt's silver bracelet, even some of my own jewelry I thought I'd lost. All of it pawned by Diane over the past 3 years to fund her obsessive planning for a wedding she didn't even have a groom for. Bridal magazines, venue tours, dress deposits, all with stolen money. It wasn't just about Rosewood. It was about a deep, twisted pathology. I started seeing a therapist, Dr. King. She specialized in family trauma. Our first session was mostly me crying, trying to understand how my sister could hate me enough to do this. Dr. King helped me realize Diane's obsession wasn't about the venue at all. It was about control and jealousy, building for years. The vineyard was just the trigger. I remembered dozens of small incidents I'd brushed off. Diane getting upset when I got better grades, sulking when I got into my first choice college, making snide comments about Oliver. All of it had been leading to this. 3 weeks after Diane's arrest, the DA called. Plea deal. Guilty to all charges, 18 months in prison with parole after 12 and full restitution. Over $30,000 to neighbors and family. Lucian said it was a fair deal. If she went to trial and lost, it could be 5 years. I asked Lucian what I should do. He said it was my decision, but the deal was reasonable. Diane accepted. The sentencing hearing was set for the following week. I had been dreading it, but Lucian said it would be powerful if I read my victim impact statement in person. So I went. I walked into that courtroom and saw Diane for the first time since everything happened. She looked smaller, paler, sitting next to her lawyer. When my turn came, I walked to the microphone. I read what Maya and I had written. I described those 6 hours in holding, the humiliation, the fear, the neighbors who still looked at me differently. I explained I could never trust her again, that she'd broken something between us that couldn't be fixed. The whole time, Diane stared down at the table. She never once looked at me, not even when the judge sentenced her to 18 months. My father reached out separately a few days later. We met for coffee. He looked older, tired. He admitted he'd known for years about Diane's jealousy and obsessive behavior. He'd caught her going through my things, noticed her fixations, but he dismissed it as normal sibling rivalry. He asked if I could forgive him for not protecting me better. I told him honestly I didn't know yet. I was still processing, but I was willing to try to maintain a relationship if he respected I needed time. He nodded, paid for our coffees, and we sat in silence for a while. The wedding planner called again with details about the garden venue. Oliver and I drove out there on a Saturday morning, both of us quiet. The place was tucked behind old oak trees, nothing like rosewood. We walked through a wooden gate into a small garden with stone pathways and flower beds. String lights hung between the trees, even in daylight. The woman said they could comfortably fit about 50 people, maybe 60 if we squeezed. I looked at Oliver. He was smiling, a real smile, the first I'd seen in weeks. We booked it right there, a deposit for 3 months out. When we got back to the car, something shifted inside me. Not happiness exactly, but something close. Hope, maybe, that our wedding could actually be about us. Not everything Diane had destroyed. The neighborhood took longer to feel normal. At the grocery store, people I'd known for years would suddenly become very interested in the produce section when I walked past. Some mumbled hello without eye contact. Others just pretended not to see me. Mrs. Walsh was different, though. She started waving every single time our paths crossed. Big, obvious waves, like she was trying to make up for doubting me. She'd call out my name across the parking lot, ask about wedding planning, her voice too loud, too cheerful. I appreciated it, even if it made me uncomfortable. The Hendersons left a fruit basket with a card that just said, "Sorry for everything." Mr. Kim just nodded at me once. People still talked, though. I'd catch fragments of conversations that stopped when I got too close. The Fletcher sister situation, they called it. My mother's email arrived on a Tuesday. Subject, family therapy. I almost deleted it, but I opened it. 6 paragraphs about how she'd started therapy for having one daughter in prison and another who wouldn't return her calls. She wrote about visiting Diane, how small she looked in uniform, how her therapist was helping her understand she'd handled everything wrong, focusing so much on protecting Diane that she'd failed to support me. But she never actually said, "I'm sorry." She never admitted defending Diane was wrong. Instead, she asked if I'd consider meeting after the wedding for a family therapy session. She wanted to rebuild our relationship, but she needed time to figure out how. I read it 3 times, then closed my laptop. I wasn't ready to forgive her. I didn't know if I ever would be. 2 months flew by. The gossip died down. Oliver and I focused on our wedding. No perfect vineyard fantasy, just a wedding that felt right for us. Maya threw me a bachelorette party. Just 5 of us, the friends who'd actually believed in me. We went to a cabin in the mountains, cooked, played cards, laughed until our stomachs hurt. No one mentioned Diane or the arrest or any of the awful stuff. We just existed, reminding each other that life could still be good. On the last night, Maya toasted me, saying how proud she was that I hadn't let Diane's actions define my future. I cried a little then, but it was the good kind of crying, the kind that feels like relief. My wedding day came on a bright Saturday in October. Oliver and I got ready in separate rooms at our new venue. I could hear music starting as guests arrived. 40 people, just 40, but they were our people. My father knocked on my door when it was time, and I took his arm. Both of us pretending not to notice my mother in the 3rd row, tissues already in hand. We walked down a stone pathway between flower beds to the sound of a guitar. Oliver was waiting under the string lights, with the biggest smile I'd ever seen. The ceremony was short, simple, just the words that mattered. I noticed the empty chair in the family section where Diane should have been, but I didn't let myself dwell on it. Oliver squeezed my hand during our vows, and I squeezed back. We knew we'd gotten through something terrible together and come out stronger. When the officiant said we were married, everyone clapped and cheered. Standing there, I realized something profound. The best revenge wasn't making Diane suffer or proving I was the better sister. The best revenge was building a beautiful life with someone who chose to believe in me when it would have been easier to walk away, surrounded by people who showed up when I needed them. So, tell me, after hearing all that, what would you have done in my place? Have you ever had to cut ties with family over something so deeply painful? I really want to know what you think.